did you know that almost a third of all people file for Social Security as soon as they can, which for most of us is age 62. But just because they filed for Social Security at 62 doesn't mean it's right for you. And so today I'm going to talk about what I consider to be the 7 most important reasons to think about filing for Social Security when you're 62. Let's go for a walk. And these 7 reasons fall into 3 main categories. And I think the last category is the most important. But first you need to understand the 2 high-level categories. And the first of those is what's called a break-even analysis. And back about a decade ago, that was probably 90% of the analysis that financial advisors would do for you. In fact, the Social Security Administration on their website had a break-even calculator prominently displayed. And essentially was saying, you know, if you think you're going to live past this age, for most people, it makes sense to postpone. And if you think you're going to die before this break-even age, for most people, it makes sense to take your Social Security sooner. But the decision is much more complex than that. It is one factor. It's an important factor, but it's not the only factor. In fact, the Social Security Administration took down that graph. They still have a good calculator. I'll put it in the show notes for you. But there's 2 other factors that are also very, very important, and I would argue the last one's the most important. So the next factor to think about is who else depends on your Social Security. So in the US, and this is not financial advice, this is information I'm sharing with you so you can do your own research. But with Social Security, for most people, their spouse can take half of the other spouse's Social Security benefit, right? So if you have a spouse that's a high earner, they probably aren't going to want to take half of the other spouse's Social Security. But if you have a spouse that has stayed at home and primarily was raising the family and maybe did not make as much money in their working years, then they may very well want to take half of their spouse's Social Security. So if you happen to be that spouse that has a much lower earnings history, and you want to take your spouse's Social Security when it comes due, then you're not going to be locked into your Social Security for your whole life, right? As soon as your spouse starts taking their Social Security and you qualify to take it, you're going to upgrade to that higher rate. So the quote-unquote penalty of taking Social Security early is less for you than it would be for somebody that's going to keep their benefit for their whole life. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the flip side of that is if you're the high earner and you have a spouse that could take Social Security, but your half would be higher than what your spouse's is, that changes the economics. And so you want to pencil that in and see what that looks like. So you might want to take your Social Security early in order to let your spouse take half of yours. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's the second one. Is first it was the break even. The second one is whose benefits might also be unlocked by you taking your benefits early or by your spouse taking their benefits early. And then the category that I think is the most important is the individual situation that makes your specific situation unique, right? What are the things that you're looking at? And one of the first ones might be, you want to preserve your investments. You have investments, you'd prefer not to be living off of your investments. And if you took Social Security early, then maybe you wouldn't have to tap into your investments. So that's one of the factors to consider. Another one to consider is, if you take Social Security at 62, that's going to be before your full retirement age. And there is a penalty associated if you make too much money. And for 2023, that number is just over $20,000 a year. And above that, essentially 50 cents of every dollar that you make above that amount is going to reduce your benefits if you're making those dollars before your full retirement age. So you want to do, and I'll link to a website or two that'll give you more information on that, but you want to be aware if you retire and take Social Security before your full retirement age, and when I say retire, I mean take Social Security, but you're still working, and if you're in a high salary job, you know, there's a penalty that's going to reduce your benefits. So you definitely want to run the math on that. And for most people, it does not make sense if they're going to trigger that penalty. So that would be the second piece. The other thing is Social Security is a nice, think of it almost like longevity insurance, right? If you end up living a long time, it's nice to have monthly money coming in that, at least the way Social Security is right now, is going to be indexed for inflation. It's going to, every year it gets adjusted based on what the cost of living is. And so if you end up living a lot longer than what you think, it's kind of longevity insurance. So if you already have a pension that is giving you a cost of living adjustment, and fair warning, there's not many of those out there. But if you do have one of those, oftentimes like a state employee or a federal government employee or a municipality employee will have a pension. Not always, you need to double check on yours, but they'll have a pension that is adjusted for inflation. So if you already have one of those, you have some longevity insurance in place, which makes the importance of Social Security's as longevity insurance, it decreases the importance. It's still important, but it decreases that importance, okay? The next reason, obviously, to take Social Security sooner rather than later is if you have poor health and or your family history is such that it leads you to believe that you're not going to live much past that break-even point. Now, you know, for a lot of folks, the difference between age 62 and the break-even point is about age 77. And the difference between full retirement age and retiring at 70, the break-even point there is at about 82. You want to run the analysis for yourself. But that tends to be kind of where the break-even points are for a lot of people. Again, it's not financial advice, but you know, if you're within a couple years of that, it's not going to move the needle enormously for you. So I wouldn't lose any sleep over that because who knows, right? If your family history is such that you tend to not make it to that age, but maybe you think you're a little bit healthier, you might make it a couple years more. That's not how to make this decision. It's really, you know, if you have a family history of living into the 90s and your doctor has told you, boy, your cholesterol numbers are great, your weight is where it needs to be, your blood pressure is where it needs to be, then you're probably going to live longer, right? None of us have any guarantees of that. But it's worth thinking about maybe waiting to take Social Security if that's your situation. Conversely, if you have high blood pressure, if you have high cholesterol, if you have a history of other people in your family dying in their 60s, then taking Social Security early is something to think about. I don't know what the right answer is for you, but it's definitely something to think about. Okay, number 4 is if you just can't work anymore, right? If you have a physically demanding job and you know your body's given out on you and you just can't work anymore, or you've worked in one job for many years and your employer has said, hey, it's, you know, unfortunately it's your time, it's time for you to think about retiring, and you don't want to start over with another company. That would be a reason definitely to think about taking Social Security early. And then the one that I think is the one that really moves the needle and gets me the most excited, frankly, is to be able to use that money at a time in your life where you're still young enough and healthy enough to fully enjoy it, right? And there's a lot to be said. Think about the utility, the joy you can get from your money at 62 versus that same money at 70 or 80 or 90. You're not going to be able to do as many things as possible. So, you know, these are some good reasons to think about taking Social Security at 62, but it's important to remember these are really, really important decisions to make. And if you want to fully think through your options, this video here talks about the reasons to think about waiting until 70. And you're going to want to watch that so that you can make the right decision for yourself. Bye-bye.